Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it is actually appropriate that in this committee we also talk about how we are going to reinforce and better uphold our own values, given that we're talking a lot about how we defend these values against attacks from the outside. You know the procedure. We've had a first round with working documents that have been presented by all the shadow rapporteurs and the rapporteur for opinion in AFCO, Mr. Schöpflin. And then I had the very complicated task to put this all together into a single report, a single proposal. That wasn't easy because it turns out that even if Article 2 may be considered one of the most important articles in the treaties, it turns out that we actually don't have a proper legal base for enforcing it or putting it into practice. So I've been shopping a little bit in all the working documents. I have made use of a wide range of expert studies and reports, including the studies that had been commissioned by LIBE, the paper proposed by FRA, and some other stuff. I would like to underline that there are a couple of guiding principles that I have used when I was drafting this report. Number one principle is that this report is only a first proposal and, as far as I'm concerned, the start of a process. This is not about this text making it to the end of the process without changing a single comma. It's rather a basis for debate. A second important guiding principle was that whatever mechanism we decide on, it must be objective, neutral, and apply equally to all the member states so that the process will be depoliticized. Then we don't want to reinvent the wheel, so a new mechanism must build on and integrate existing instruments as much as possible so that we don't duplicate. We already have a rule of law framework in the European Commission, we have the Council rule of law dialogue, and we have a wide range of other instruments, and we will try and integrate them as much as possible. Then, as I said, this is very much about the process. This is not about a one-off decision about setting standards to measure to what extent European values are being upheld, but it's an ongoing, open and inclusive process. Even if we decide on a mechanism, it will have to be further elaborated and expanded and enriched and modified in the years after. Also because even if some basic values will remain the same, the way we see them in a societal context changes over time. So it cannot be a static decision. Then another important one is that I want a mechanism that is not crisis or incident driven, so that we get away from this silly debate about yes or no applying Article 7, which is, or yes or no applying other sanctions in the case of another member state at the moment, because that will only lead to a standoff between one member state and the European Union, and it's not very helpful. So rather we need a mechanism that involves permanent monitoring of all the member states and the EU institutions, and it should be a process that actually fosters a culture of democracy, the rule of law and fundamental rights, and that actually prevents violations of those values and de-escalates. It does include corrective steps and sanctions, but they should not be triggered by incidents and ad hoc decisions, but on the basis of evidence and a graduated process. Okay, so those were the guiding principles. And I was looking for the proper legal base for such a mechanism. That was not easy. There wasn't a single legal base that offered all the options that we wanted. So in the end I've chosen for the instrument of an interinstitutional agreement, which is not a pretty solution, but hopefully a pragmatic one. And I have elaborated a draft interinstitutional agreement in the annex to the report, and it contains the following elements. Mainly, one is what I call the DRF scoreboard. DRF is democracy, the rule of law and fundamental rights. a scoreboard with country-specific reports and a panel of independent experts. Second element is a DRF semester involving an interparliamentary debate between the European Parliament and national parliaments, including arrangements for the preventative and corrective arm of Article 7 as a last resort. And finally, the so-called DRF policy cycle within the EU institutions, because it's not enough that we only look at the member states, but we should also assess our own work and see if we actually meet the standards that we set. Well, I won't go through all the articles and bore you with that, but basically what it comes down to is that we use all the instruments that already exist. I mean, we have a very wide range of instruments within the EU institutions, like the Justice Scoreboard. We have the CVM for Bulgaria and Romania. We have a corruption report. We have a media pluralism monitor. We have, and then there are all the non-EU instruments, and they should be integrated into a single system that will be a scoreboard with country-specific recommendations. And that scoreboard, that report, will be the basis for an annual debate in the European Parliament with the national parliaments, the Commission and the Council. And it can ultimately, if necessary, be used in a step-by-step approach towards Article 7, should that really be necessary. But I personally hope that such a mechanism would actually make that superfluous. Well, a few final remarks. In the end, the key, I think, to all this is trust. And that is why I have chosen an approach which I hope is consensus-based, rather than putting forward the text and then arguing over amendments and having a 50% plus one majority, because then it won't work. This should not be seen as something which is imposed top-down. It's something that very much should involve all citizens, member states, national parliaments, the majority of the political groups. This is also why I'm making an effort to contact national parliaments, the Council, the Commission, and try and gather consensus. And I think this process is actually the most important element. Okay, finally, there's already a draft report or a draft opinion by AFCO and amendments. We will try and integrate that to the largest extent possible, one-on-one as far as I'm concerned. We'll also try, because I keep getting a lot of input now by all sorts of people who are interested. I will probably also table amendments myself based on that input. I've also organised a series of informal lunch meetings. I've already held 2. They're not big events, but if there are MEPs who are interested in participating, please let us know. They are lunch meetings with NGOs, the judiciary, EU and international institutions, the employers, the trade unions, consumer organisations, religious and non-confessional organisations, and associations of journalists. The deadline for amendments will be the 13th of May, and then I think we have a first debate. The date escapes me now, the 21st of May, I believe. I'm looking at something like that. So I'm looking forward to your comments. Thank you.